Well, my best friend growing up was Eddie Morton. We used to ride our bicycles from near Siesta and Osprey, where we lived, to Southside School. And I remember one time riding home, and I don't remember how when I was 8 or 9 years old, and we rode through the backyard of some lady's house between Southside School and Siesta Drive. And by the time we got home, the lady had called both my mother and Eddie Morton's mother and said, "Your boys are riding through my..." So that's how small a town it was. When a funeral would occur in Sarasota, and you'd see the funeral procession, cars would peel off and so forth, and you knew who had died. It was that small a town at the time. I'm Jim Tollerton from Sarasota, Florida. Been here 70 years and love this community. The town began to grow as Northerners like we were moved down from the north. That's when the great migration really started. The town was focused on growth, wanted to grow. The Chamber of Commerce, the JCs, the community wanted to grow. In fact, we did. Mostly the county grew more than the city, but lately, of course, the city is. Even the city commission wanted to have a growing city. It was a safe city. Ken Thompson was the city manager, ran one of the best cities in the country. He'd been succeeded by another professional manager, the Wyndham family, that's still here. And it was safe, clean water, good sewer system, believe it or not, centralized. Streets were good, a great police department, safe. It was nice to grow up in that kind of an environment. In the mid-50s, 1955, before the polio vaccine, there was an epidemic, would come every summer. And I remember growing up on Tulip Drive at the end of the street, one of the young fellows, also in elementary school with me, got polio. And I can remember the visceral fear that my parents had of the exposure to polio. Don't play with him, don't go near his house, and so forth. And then, of course, Salk invented a vaccine a year or so later. And they lined us up at Southside School and gave us all vaccine shots. No parental permission, just did it. Sarasota reflected the national change, the election of John Kennedy as president. There was a new vigor, used to be his word, and the county was proud of its growth, proud of its own community, continued to expand and grow. The civil rights movement was coming along in the early 60s and became obviously much more active locally here in Sarasota also. Yes, Sarasota was a segregated city. The civil rights movement did make a difference in Sarasota. There were protests by the blacks, African Americans at the Lido Beach, Siesta Beach. There was a sit-ins at the Woolworth lunch counter of Woolworth 5 and Dime in Southgate and other places. And so Sarasota went through the same angst as the country did in moving out of a segregationist area into a more inclusive community. Sarasota High School was integrated. I was there. Nice young African-American girl came in. I think she was a sophomore or something like that. And I can remember how surprised I was at the treatment she got. I mean, mean and nasty, unnecessary efforts thrown at her, and she kept her focus and kept her books and just kept going. But later, of course, more and more African Americans entered Sarasota High School and graduated and have done well. Fortunately, some stayed around. So, well, there were both extremes in the segregation times. People that wanted more integration and people wanted less. And I think that my class reflected that. The high school reflected that. And there were many people who were gracious and kind to the young lady that integrated our school and later on, and there were some that were just unnecessarily mean and nasty for no apparent reason to otherwise a very nice young lady. One incident I recall, the city buses used to be segregated. In the back, there was a sign across the back saying, "Coloreds." And my brother and I would ride the bus, believe it or not, at 8, 9 years old out to Lido Pavilion, Lido Pool, for our swimming lessons. You wouldn't let your kid on a bus today like that, but we'd go to 5 Points, get a transfer, and go to Lido, get our lesson. But I remember thinking, that's not right, colored sitting in the back. So my brother and I would go sit back there in the back seat. In 1962, I was, I believe, a junior at Sarasota High School. In the old building, I can recall during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962, we were embargoing intermediate range missiles that were being sent by the Russians into Cuba, which is 90, 120 miles away from us. Those missiles could have hit Washington, D.C., and President Kennedy embargoed, in other words, forbade Russia from bringing any more over. They had seen some in the satellites. But I can recall America preparing for an invasion by moving convoys of military vehicles down US 41 from MacDill Air Force Base and McCoy Air Force Base and even up into Bennington, Georgia and so forth. And it was day after day of a stream of convoys going to basically Homestead, which was a big Air Force base and assembly point at the time. And we saw it, and it was very real for us. I mean, we were on the verge of potential war with the Russians and the Cubans, and we were preparing for it. Baseball was pretty pivotal for me and for my friends. Originally, early on, they would actually close the schools during opening day in March at the spring training at Payne Park. And we would sometimes have tickets to get in, sometimes we'd sneak under the fence and so forth. There was an advantage because in Payne Park, it was such an old park, that the dressing room was actually in a Quonset hut. I can remember watching Ted Williams of the Boston Red Sox at Payne Park, who would come out after a game and he'd hit 100 balls over the right field fence, which was surrounded by a mobile home park in the city of Sarasota. And they finally had to ask him to kind of ease off because he was breaking so many windows in the mobile homes, hitting the ball over the right field fence at Payne Park. When President Kennedy was assassinated in November of '63, I was a senior at Sarasota High School. And obviously his assassination stunned the country, Sarasota too, and galvanized us for several days during the funeral. But the interesting thing to me was the week before he had visited Tampa in the same open car. And my brother and I had seen President Kennedy go down Central Avenue, which was later renamed Kennedy Boulevard today. And I thought at the time, you know, it might be a little dangerous driving around that open air car like that, which obviously a week later affected him pretty badly. So the emergence of women leaders in Sarasota has been obviously a healthy thing. It started, I think, originally because the legislature passed a law which said that the party organizations, the Democratic and Republican parties, had to be 50-50 in their executive committee and the representation of the state party. And so some women emerged as political leaders in their own right, later elected to the city commission and the county commission, and have proven to be very positive influences in our community. There's a difference today in the way the city is run and government is run. In those days, Ken Thompson would gather the 5 city commissioners for a lunch on the Monday before the commission meetings. They would sometimes even get in a car and go around and look at the planning and zoning issues or the sewer issues or whatever it was, and they'd kind of decide what they were going to do at the commission meeting that night. And of course today that's totally illegal, but that's the way they operated back then. And it was mostly business leaders, men, frankly, that were the city commissioners and the leaders of the community at the time. Healthcare is a pivotal element in keeping a good community, and we've been very fortunate at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, which is approaching its 100th birthday in 2025, has been kind of a pillar of the community. It's a public hospital run by a publicly elected board of directors that's been exemplary over the years, I think, and they've hired some very good administrators, professional administrators, and they've insisted on a top quality medical staff and nursing staff and technicians. Sarasota Memorial has a thriving international medical practice. There are people fly in from around the world, particularly for our heart program. They're beginning to notice our cancer program at Sarasota Memorial and in our community, which is apropos of the airport and flying and transportation and so forth. We used to have 2 train stations in Sarasota, one of which, of course, the Ringling Circus came in every winter to train. And I can remember as a kid watching them offload and march a mile or so out to what was then North Oriente Avenue. It's now North Beneva, and where the circus quarters was. And they'd practice out there, and they'd have a big tent. There's a model of it at the Ringling Museum that Howard Tibbles did and presented to the museum as a gift. And I mean, to see those animals and the caged animals marched out Fruitville Road, wonderful memory of growing up. As with life, I think a thriving community starts with attitude. Are the people living there, do they want to grow? Do they want to not grow? Are you safe? Do you have safe streets, good streets? Do you have clean water? Do you have a sewer system that works? Do you have garbage that gets picked up? And do you have a good education system and a good health care system in the community? And we check all those boxes in Sarasota, I think. Sarasota has grown from being a city, a small city, into a much larger area now. We have, over 1 million people here in the winter visitors and so forth, a permanent population of 400,000 or so. So instead of being 40,000 people in the county, we're 400,000 plus a lot of visitors. But again, all the basics are, does the system work? Do the institutions work, the public institutions, together to provide for a safe community, a thriving community like we've got in Sarasota? Sarasota's, over the years, been subjected to the same elements as every other community. The one constant in life is change. And Sarasota's experienced change, but I believe change creates opportunity. All organisms abhor change. The amoeba abhors change. Yet how do we grow? Through change. And on balance, in a democracy like we live in a free country, there's tug and pull, give and take, and we've survived. We're not perfect. We aren't going to be perfect, but it's a great place to live on balance, and will be, I hope. Sarasota has been a great place to grow up, to raise my children, now raising grandchildren. It's a thriving community. It's an artistic community. It's a cross-section of the country. You've got both elements here. I think it's, frankly, paradise. I've called it paradise. I think it's wonderful. And I'm very proud to have been associated with it, and I hope my kids enjoy it and my grandkids enjoy it in the future.